Good evening. As this Maundy Thursday turns to evening, we begin our journey to the cross. This service of shadows is a time to quiet ourselves and to reflect on Jesus' last days, and this service of shadows is told through those closest to Jesus, his disciples, his friends, his mother. I'd invite you who are attending to listen, to reflect, and to take time as we move through Holy Week to the cross and ultimately through the cross to Easter. It was a time for shadows. Before the glorious light of resurrection morning, there were dark nights and even darker days. On our way towards rejoicing in the resurrection, we enter that shadow land. Those days of darkness, the darkness that stretched from the upper room to the arrest, from trial to trial, from the mocking to the scourging, from the cross to the tomb. Dark days lie ahead of us, too. Somber days, shadowed days. We ask hard questions. Will we notice the light in the midst of so many shadows? Would we notice the light were it not for the shadows? It is the time for shadows.
The shadow of betrayal by Judas. I don't know when it happened, but things changed somehow. At first he was strong, confident, outspoken. I had such high hopes. Finally a leader to throw off the Romans. But just when the time was right, at the height of his popularity, he withdrew. He became quiet, almost introspective. I thought a bit of a push would help him to reach for greatness. You know, pass on a bit of information about his movements. And make a bit on the side for me. And then watch him rise to glory when they came for him. Only it did not work out like that. He let them take him. "You'll betray me, Judas," he said. I wonder how he knew. I thought I'd been discreet, but I did not expect it to turn out the way it did.
The Shadow of Inner Agony by Salome, the mother of James and John. He was such a unique boy, my nephew, cousin to my sons, James and John, but more of a friend to them, really, and to me. He was always caring, always serving, always putting others first. I remember when I asked him if my boys could sit on thrones with him in his kingdom, one on his left and one on his right. "Salome," he said to me, "the great ones in God's kingdom are the ones who serve. Even I have come to serve and to lay down my life." I felt rather humbled that day. It's incredible that in his time of agony, praying all alone, the ones he served so well couldn't serve him in return. Not for one short hour. There they were, my sons and Peter, all asleep while Jesus cried and sweated blood, and none of the others of us were any better. Alone he prayed, "Take this cup away from me, but not my will, Father, yours be done."
The Shadow of Desertion by John. That was a dark night. We didn't expect those terrible things. Perhaps we should have foreseen it, prepared for it. Maybe then we would have reacted differently and stood with him through it all. But we didn't understand. So there we were, Peter, James, and me, fast asleep, oblivious to his pain. And suddenly he's waking us up. And there is Judas, and lights, and swords, and soldiers, and they're arresting Jesus. We were no match for them, and they would have taken us too. We were terrified, and so we ran away, all of us, and left him to face their swords alone.
The Shadow of Denial by Peter. What was I thinking? I expected so much more from myself. Oh, at the table it was easy. When Jesus talked about being betrayed and arrested and dying, I was angry and protective. "I'll fight for you, Lord," I said. "I'll die for you." I thought he was just frightened and emotional when he replied, "No, Peter, before the cock crows 3 times, you will deny knowing me." Deny him? I wouldn't have thought it possible. But that was then. Now I know it's true. When it finally came down to it, I couldn't fight for him. I couldn't die for him. I couldn't even answer the question, "Yes, I know him. I follow him. I believe in him." And so they led him away. He looked at me, those eyes. I expected anger and judgment, but there was only love in his eyes. There was only ever love.
Please join in singing the hymn, "What Wondrous Love Is This," verses 1 through 3.
The Shadow of Accusation by Mary Magdalene. People were curious about my devotion to Jesus, but it was easy to understand, really. I lived with accusations all my life: mad woman, evil, possessed. They said it all and more. But Jesus, he did not accuse. He didn't judge. He didn't make any demands or require anything. For the first time, someone saw past the pain and the brokenness of my soul and gave me freedom I longed for. Of course I was devoted. Ironic that the one who accepted and included all without accusations should be forced to hear the lies about himself, should stand alone and face all those pointed fingers. The one whose only crime was acceptance, sentenced to death on the force of false accusations by the ones he sought to love and heal.
The Shadow of Mockery by Thomas. Somehow, I've developed a reputation for doubt and questioning. A little unfairly, I think. But I do confess to being confused and uncertain, especially at the end. I mean, he healed the sick. He raised the dead. The whole nation was eating out of the palm of his hand. Then suddenly they were screaming, "Crucify him!" With all his power, he just stood there. And then when the soldiers mocked him, he took it all. They stripped his body, torn from the terrible flogging, and pretended to worship him as king. With a crown of hard Judean thorns, they hit him, spat on him, and pulled out his hair and beard. How was I to understand this? He could have snuffed them out in a heartbeat, but he did not. He just let them mock.
The Shadow of Death by Mary, the mother of Jesus. Should I have known that moment would come? There had been death threats from when he was a baby, and he'd spoken about his death more than once. Maybe I should have seen it, but nothing can prepare a mother to watch her child die. I don't know how I got through that day. My son, sentenced to crucifixion, the slowest and most agonizing death, executed with thieves. My son who had done nothing wrong. And in the face of it all, he forgave them, forgave all of us. Then he cried out, "It is finished." And as I watched that last breath leave his body, it was like it was me dying up there.
my Lord. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb?
If I was unprepared for Jesus' death, I was completely flabbergasted by what would follow.
It is a time for shadows. Before the glorious light of resurrection morning, there are dark nights and even darker days. On our way toward rejoicing in the resurrection, we have entered that shadowed land, those days of darkness, the darkness that stretched from the upper room to the tomb. Dark days lie ahead, somber days, shadowed days. We have asked terrifying questions. Will we notice the light in the midst of so many shadows? Would we notice the light were it not for the shadows? But we are ending with a triumphant question. Would there be shadows were it not for the light? It is a time for shadows, but it is also a time for hope.